Now I would like to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Chuck Shipp. Chuck is the owner and founder of Shipp Cleaning Systems, which has been in operation since 1979. The largest fabric manufacturers to develop products that were safe and effective for vinyl fabrics, and has secured product approval from the two largest fabric manufacturers. With over 40 years of research, product development, and techniques for cleaning tents, Chuck brings a wealth of knowledge in the field to our discussion today. Chuck's presentation may run slightly over our time today, but he will open the floor for questions after his presentation. And if you have a question and don't get the opportunity to ask, feel free to send an email to Chuck. His email is located in his bio, which will be shared soon after the webinar, along with the slide deck and handout, and the link to this recording. So with that being said, please join me in welcoming Chuck Shipp.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. I am coming to you after 40 some odd years of mistakes in cleaning tents, and hopefully I can help you guys avoid some mistakes and learn the quick route to maintaining your tents. Of course, the big point of all of this is to get the highest return on investment that we can on our tent rental. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So before we even get started, let's just talk about what we're actually looking at. We're looking at vinyl. And this vinyl is kind of a unique product. It has a shiny side, which goes, can you see it? Am I still on screen? Am I still on screen?
You are not. It looks like,
No.
Yeah, I don't know what we've got going on. Hold on one second. Chuck, I don't know if that is, have you started broadcasting by chance?
Me?
It says Trevor.
Oh, Trevor.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, Trevor, could you stop sharing your screen? Hey, Trevor, yep, you have, I think you've spotlighted Chuck for everyone. Could you, let's see, I'm going to try to take him, see.
What? Here we go.
Yeah. Hey, Trevor. Yeah, can you hear us, Trevor?
See that button that says,
Oh,
okay, there we go. Perfect.
There we go. Okay, now we see you again. Thanks, Trevor.
So what we're dealing with today is basically a vinyl. It's a vinyl fabric. It's very unique in that it has a shiny side. The shiny side goes on the outside of the tent, so it sheds water and rain and anything else that comes at it a little bit easier. And then you have a matte finish, a dull side, and that's on the interior part of the tent. So on the shiny side, as we look at this piece of fabric, you've got 5 layers. So you have a layer of vinyl, a layer of what we call block out. Then we have the scrim. The scrim is the part that creates the screen effect. That's a polyester screen fabric inside of there, and that gives it the tensile strength. So it allows you to pull on it and stretch on it. Then another layer of block out, and then the layer of vinyl. So basically there's 5 layers here to this piece of fabric. Now, just so you can understand, and this is a great little demo to do for any new hire that you have, is to bring them in and say, look, this stuff is not Kevlar. It doesn't stop bullets. It's very fragile. It's more like tissue paper than it is like Kevlar. So to show you that, I take a piece of vinyl and I fold it to a point in the middle. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to rub it on the carpet about 3 or 4 times. All right. And unfold it. And if you'll notice, and hopefully you can see this close enough, this actually made, I can almost see a hole in there, and you can see where it peeled off that top layer of block out and the vinyl all the way down to the scrim. And there's actually a microscopic little hole in there you can't see. That's how easily you can tear up your tent fabric. And that was on carpet. So what you want to do is the main thing to life, the key to life, is you always tarp. Whenever you put down your tent, it's always going to be a tarp. They usually are blue, so you'll hear me say the blue tarp a lot, but it's anything that protects the vinyl from the ground. You can imagine how much worse it would be on concrete, on asphalt. And if it burns it on carpet, you know that at any time you have an edge like that, it's going to tear it up. And when a tent's folded and you take it out of the bag and you start dragging it right off on the floor, that's what you're in, you know, you run the possibility of tearing up a tent. So that's where we're going to start with. Now we're going to go, I've got a little slide presentation here we're going to go over with, and hopefully I can remember to do this properly. And we're going to share. And does everything look good to you there, Nikki?
Yep, you're good. Yep.
Okay. So as you look at this, hopefully we're cleaning with something better than just little brushes on our tents. And sometimes you feel like you're cleaning with actually a toothbrush. And so hopefully we're not cleaning with some little minor thing. Maybe many of you have cleaned tents like this on your hands and knees. At some point in time, I think we all end up cleaning tents on our hands and knees at some point. Hopefully, though, on your production of cleaning tents, we can get you off your hands and knees and get you onto at least your feet cleaning with brushes. And we're going to talk a little bit more today about how to avoid this and get to the first level of mechanization, which is a floor machine. Some people call them a buffer, and you'll hear me refer to it as a buffer. But this machine is 175 RPMs. It weighs right at 100 pounds. And this is the first layer of coming mechanization and getting you off your knees and your feet. The next level of mechanization is a drum washing machine, actually made just for tents. And this is your typical washing machine. And these things will run between a minimum of 75,000 to 100,000 US in terms of cost. And that includes installation and everything. You'll see the plumbing over there to the right, over here where the hoses are. That it usually have to have a setup for that. Then there is what we call a flat panel washer. And this is basically there for structured tents and panels. And it works out real easy when you have panels, and you can feed it through there, and it has brushes, doesn't dry it. But if you'll notice behind this flat panel washer, there's still a floor machine, still a buffer. And even with these machines, at some point in time, and you'll see a drum machine behind that. Is my cursor showing, Nikki? Nikki, is my cursor showing?
Yeah, it's showing.
Yes, sorry, I couldn't
good.
unmute in time.
Oh, you see that that machine there behind there, and they still are at times where if tents are really dirty, you will still have to use a floor machine. This is a $250,000 US panel washer. It runs it through two different brushes and then dries it and then spits it out dry. That's unusual, and that's for someone that has several $1 million worth of tent fabric. But today we're going to focus literally on just how to clean with the floor machine. And it's a little bit of a technique. And I have a video from a tent school I did for a company called Rainier Tent. And you'll see that we have a man just mopping up from that. But let's go over this video that we have here. What I do, and I'm going to have it muted here. Really kind of cool. It's not letting me mute it there, but we'll just see what we can do here. There. All right. So now what I do is I'm taking a sprayer, just a pump-up sprayer. I'm diluting our tent cleaner about 1 to 25, and I'm spraying it on the tent. Now, I'm always apply the tent cleaner to a dry fabric. I don't ever pre-wet because the water acts like an ionization barrier and prevents the cleaner from actually touching what we call the film. This film is called electrolysis film. Electromagnetically bonds the dirt to the vinyl. And so it's more on there than just stuck on there. And it's a little bit like road film on a car. You have to use something that's going to scrub it off. So we put our tent cleaner on, and then, and I call this a low water method of cleaning tents. And you'll notice we're inside a building. And I apply the tent cleaner, and as I apply it, hopefully we can get over here. I work my way down. I usually do about a 20-foot run. This is a 20 by 40 piece of vinyl, and I usually do about a 20-foot run at a time. In this particular video, I only did about a 10-foot run just to show what we were doing. Now, with the floor machine, you can put a pad underneath the floor machine. You could put a brush, and they use bristles that are about 2 inches long, and they're polypropylene, and you could scrub with the brush. I like pads because I can vary my scrubbing, and it seems like it's just a better scrub. So in the world of pads, the white pad is the softest, then a red pad, and then underneath that you have a green and a brown and a black. You may have stripped and waxed floors before and use a black pad for stripping floors. It's super aggressive. On this case, I like to use the red pad. Is typically just a little bit easier to use and a little bit simpler to put onto the machine. And I go basically up. I go out there with the pad driver and I set it on top of the red pad. And now I'm going to clean in a grid pattern. And I go left to right with this floor machine, and I very succinct. I don't just run it like I would in a fan pattern. I'm going to do a grid pattern. And if you ever run a floor machine, you raise it up, it goes to the right. You lower it, it goes to the left. It's just a 175 RPM underneath there with running that. And I'm just running it back and forth. Now, since you actually have to raise it to go left or right, sometimes it leaves highlights. And so to avoid highlights, I like to come back over here and I go crisscross back across those lines. And that way I make sure I've gotten every square inch of the fabric and I don't have it rinsed and notice that I've got a swath of brown that didn't come out because I missed it. But I'm going very quickly now on a crisscross, faster than I did the first time, going across it. And then when we get through with all that, I'm going to come back and I'm going to rinse it with mops. Now, you notice I'm not using a garden hose. I'm not using a pressure washer. I'm having people with mops. Now, the difference is with this mopping is that I'm actually having in that clear water, in that rinse water, I put about half a liter of white vinegar. And white vinegar, not the yellowy stuff that you cook with, but white vinegar is very inexpensive. But if you might remember your high school chemistry, you have a pH scale, and pH 7 is neutral, same pH as water. But 7 to 14 is alkali, and 7 down to 1 is acidic. And the cleaners are usually around 11 to 12 pH, and vinegar is about a 4.5 pH. And so that's why I like to use the vinegar in the water. I'm neutralizing the alkalinity in this cleaner, and I'm also making sure that the water itself is not leaving a film. So you might remember people that clean windows, they'll use vinegar and water in cleaning windows. They're getting the hard water stains off of the windows and that sort of thing. Well, vinegar also will get any mineral deposits that are on the vinyl off as well, plus hopefully leave a shinier shine on the tent. So literally, I just showed you the way I like to clean a tent. I use chemical sprayed on. I come back, I scrub it with the floor machine. I crisscross back across my lines that I just made, and then I damp mop it up. Now, why do I do this? I do this because if I were to use a garden hose or a pressure washer, first off, pressure washers could hit a pinhole and destroy your vinyl. So I don't like pressure washers at all. But if you were using a garden hose, what happens is you end up loading up the hems and the seams with water. Now, that traps the water in those hems and seams. I can now string up my tent and let it dry, but that water is still trapped in the hems and the seams. The seams are only about a half an inch, and the hems are usually about an inch, maybe even 2 inches. So now that water's going to stay in there a lot longer than the dry fabric. And so I'm going to go up to the fabric and it feels dry to me. I fold up the tent, put it in the bag, and then take it out a month later for a rental. And it's got mildew everywhere because I did not get that trapped water out of the tent. And so if I don't have to use a garden hose and I damp mop it, I just didn't load up my hems and the seams. And now when the tent's going to be dry in a few hours, and I don't have to worry about the trapped water creating mold and mildew when I fold it up and put it in the bag. So does that make sense to everyone? I can hear, anybody can say yes.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I
Okay,
have a quick
good.
question. Like, do you ever
Sure.
add like vinegar to like a tent washing machine? Like we own a tent washing machine, but we've never used vinegar in addition to our soap. But is that something that you would consider doing as well?
I would, but I'm usually, are you washing in your washing machine clear vinyl as well?
Oh, yeah, we do a combination of clear and white tops
Yeah,
and color.
I really like the vinegar on clear vinyl because it does get hard water stains on clear vinyl that show up. The hard water on white vinyl doesn't show up as much. I'm just trying to make it as shiny as it can with the vinegar. But I'm really concerned about the clear vinyl having all the hard water stains that could possibly be on there taken off. So keep that in mind that yes, you could use it, especially on clear vinyl. You just don't want things to smell too vinegary, even though the white vinegar is a lot milder in odor. Just be aware you don't want to end up with a vinegar smelling tent. So just be aware of that. That's the only thing because then if you use it in the machine, the straps get it. The straps trap a lot of water, and then the Velcro, whatever Velcro may be there, and the Keter a lot of times is fabric. So if you got a Keter tent, everybody knows what a Keter is. You got to worry about that as well. So just be aware of fabric sucking up that vinegar odor in a machine.
So
Okay,
But
Chuck,
basically that's it. Okay, now
sorry, Chuck, just sorry to interrupt. We have another question that's come through on the chat here from Jeff, and he is just asking, what did you say your ratio of vinegar is in your rinse water?
I've got about 3 gallons. I'm sorry, I don't know too well. I went through the trouble to figure out what a liter was. But so usually I've got 3 gallons or so in that mop bucket that we saw earlier of rinse water. And I'm going to add about half a liter of white vinegar to that rinse water. On the cleaner, I'm going to dilute the cleaner about 1 to 25 parts. So 1 part of cleaner to 25 parts of water. And you can calculate that, whatever measurement system is the easiest for you to figure. But usually in a pump up sprayer, they're 2 gallons big. And I'm sorry to use gallons here, but anyhow, and I'm usually putting about half a quart in a 2 gallon sprayer of cleaner. So I hope that makes those ratios make some sense. Any other questions?
I'll let you know
Okay.
if anything comes through here.
You bet. All right.
I
Now,
was just gonna say, in lieu of a mop, if we have to put the tent away immediately, for whatever reason, we don't have we wash our tents outside.
Right.
We actually use terry towel rags in white. We buy bales
Yes.
of white rags, and we hand rag off the dirt. And I mean, we've been doing it for 2 years, and we roll it up immediately. We call it the low water. We
Yes.
wash the exact method you do. We towel it off, and it goes away. And we have bought some absolutely disgusting tents and used and turned them into brand new. Like, yeah. So
I'm so glad you said that, because there's something about that downward pressure, that floor machine scrubbing it. It just makes all the difference. And you're not going to hurt the tent. You got the lubricity of the cleaner. You got that red pad that's fine at 175 RPMs. It's not going to hurt anything, but you're never going to put a floor machine on a tent that you haven't put cleaner down first. And it does just clean so well. And you're right. You can just literally take a tent that looks like a You know, if you got an A, B, C, D rating on your tent, it may look like a C or a D rating, and scrub it, and it's a wedding tent again. It's an A level tent. And so that really makes a big difference. I'm so glad you brought that up. And toweling it off and doing it this way, it literally is the least destructive on the vinyl that you can get. Now, I will tell you, if you have several hundred tents, or maybe even 100 or so tents, putting a machine in there and washing it in a machine is not going to destroy the vinyl. And you've got the bottleneck of having to wash all these dirty tents, and the machine makes a big difference on how quick you can get those tents washed. But when you do it by hand, like he was just saying, you have really protected that vinyl in a way where it's going to last you for years. And a machine just puts a little bit more stress on the vinyl. Tent manufacturers do not like the machines, but they're a necessary evil if you're going to get tents out for rental. They come in, you got to get it cleaned, boom, boom, and you got it out. And a lot of times you don't even have time to dry it. You're taking that tent out of the washing machine and taking it straight out to a location for rental. So it dries on site. I've seen people do that several times. So you need a machine if you've got, dozens and dozens of tents that have got to go in and out the door. But what he was just discussing, doing it by hand toweling, drying it off and cleaning it, you can't treat a tent better than that. And it makes a big difference. If there are any more questions about cleaning white vinyl before we move on. If there's not, we're going to talk about mold and mildew. Mildew is the boogaboo of everyone in the tent business. It is just the one thing that everybody has a terrible problem with. When I first started working with cleaning tents in the mid 80s, I was walking in these equipment rental stores, and I've been in equipment rental stores for about 5 years at that time. And I was noticing people were cleaning their tents, but they were soaking it in household bleach. And household bleach is what we call sodium hypochlorite. It's very corrosive. It eats up a lot of things. It dry rots polyester stitching. It dry rots the straps. It also dry rot or takes the plasticizer, the flexibility of the vinyl. It robs it out of the vinyl tent. But they were soaking their tents in bleach. And, consequently, a tent would not last more than 3 to 4 years because it was just become so stiff and dry rotted that nobody wanted to put it up anymore. So along comes a product called calcium hypochlorite. So there's two different types of chlorine. You have a sodium hypochlorite, that's bleach. Calcium hypochlorite, and I'm going to refer to it as Cal Hypo just for short, because that's how we talk about it in the chemical business. The Cal Hypo was 200 times less corrosive than household bleach. But not only that, it's a stabilized chlorine, whereas household bleach is a very unstable chlorine. Sodium hypochlorite, household bleach, bleeds off chlorine ions all the time. And you'll notice there'll be grocery stores will have sales on the bleach because they know it's losing potency as it sits on the shelf. Whereas the calcium hypochlorite will be stable for years. And I have used 6-7-year-old Cal Hypo to take off mold and mildew off of vinyl siding, and it just worked great. So it retains its chlorine for years. But the main reason you're using it, Cal Hypo, is because it is 200 times less corrosive. So you can use it on vinyl tents for years. It doesn't hurt it. It doesn't dry rot it. And so here's how you use it. You spray down the calcium hypochlorite. We have a product called Blitz that does this, but it's the same thing. You can just ask for calcium hypochlorite from anybody that sells tent cleaning supplies. And you spray it onto the dry fabric. This is the one product that you can actually let dry on the tent. And so you can spray it onto the tent and walk away. And it's going to make the mold and mildew. If it's recent, it'll usually disappear with one spraying. And so you come back an hour or so later after it's dried. If you still see mildew, then spray it again and walk away. I've never had mildew still there after 3 sprayings. That's the most I've ever had to spray a tent for mildew. So spray it, let it dwell. It's all about a dwell. It does not have anything to do with elbow grease. Scrubbing with a floor machine or with a brush by hand does not help mildew. The only thing it does is to let it sit. And the reason why is because that chlorine is going down to the organic molecule of the mold and mildew and erasing it. Just literally, we hate to use the word kill because that becomes an EPA conversation. It just removes that vinyl, and that's what it does. And it does get to what we call the roots or the spores of the mildew to remove it. So basically, that's how you get rid of mildew, is by spraying it with a calcium hypochlorite and letting it sit, let it dwell. Any questions on mildew removal? All right, good. We're going to move on. So if you've had tents out for years and you've been using them for years and years, eventually they get kind of a gray film on there. Well, there's two different types of gray film. Now, everything I'm telling you is on this primer, the Tent Cleaning 101 that we sent out to you today. And so I'm telling you stuff that's in that paperwork, so you don't need to take a whole lot of notes here. But when you get a gray film on a tent, it's either one of two things. It's either a pollution from soot and just general pollution settling on a tent. Just to give you an idea, I had a guy in Virginia that called me up and he said, I got a gray film on this tent. It sits out all summer from like April through September at a university. And it's got this gray film on it and we don't know what it is. And I said, well, okay, it probably hard water and rain and dew is settled on it and it's put this gray film on there. And they tried what I'm going to tell you about for that, and it didn't work. So then I said, well, wait a minute. Why don't you try the orange oil or the pine oil, what we're going to call organic oil removal process. And they said, oh, we did it and it worked. It turned out that 20 miles west of there was a wood pulp factory, and all that wood pulp stuff would settle on that tent. After 2 or 3 months, it would become gray. And so there's two, it could be that, or it could be mineral deposits, and you take that off with an acid. So it's a specialized acid. There again, people that supply tent cleaning supplies will know what I'm talking about, but it's a hydrochloric phosphoric blend. And so to determine whether it's pollution or whether it's hard water, what I do is I take my tent. I don't even have to unfold it very much. I just have to create 2 indentations, little puddles, and I pour the acid in one and I pour the organic oil in the other, and I let it sit. And I let it sit maybe 15 minutes. And so after 15 minutes, excuse me, if that oil is, I wipe them both out with a dry cloth, and whichever one makes it the whitest, I know that's what it's based in. So the organic oil takes out pollution. The acid is going to take off mineral deposits. And believe it or not, this tent you're looking at right there was mineral deposits. I thought right off the bat, I thought, oh, this pollution, but it wasn't. Then I had this guy call me up and he says, I have tents that stay up year round at the Michigan Speedway. And I said, okay. And he cleaned the tent, and there you see the speedway behind the building where the racetrack is. But he tried the organic oil, and 100% it took it off. And the reason why is because we know that the infield tents, these tents have all this pollution coming from the cars racing around on the track. It just makes obvious sense. But you cannot tell by looking at the tent, usually, whether it's mineral deposits or pollution. So does that kind of make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? And you can see he has a little pump up sprayer here that he put that organic oil in. The organic oils are not petroleum. Now, why do we have to use an organic oil instead of petroleum? Vinyl is made out of petroleum. It's a vinyl product, so it's a petroleum byproduct. If we use anything that's petroleum, mineral spirits, brake parts cleaner, contact spray, anything that could be, that has petroleum distillates in it, that includes Goo Gone, Goof Off, all those products are based in petroleum. If you use it to take off duct tape, tar, adhesive, paint, anything of that nature, it will yellow the vinyl, and it doesn't do it right away. So if I use mineral spirits to take off some duct tape, and then I turn around and open that bag up a couple of weeks later, it will have yellowed it. And it's kind of like a light yellow stain. Looks like a dog peed on it, and it's just yellow, and it won't come off. And no matter what you do, it is permanently yellow. So we use these organic oils, and one is an orange oil. That's what they call terpenes, orange terpenes, Terpenes. And then they have pine terpenes. And so the reason we have the pine is because it's a little bit more, it's a lot less expensive and a lot less in demand than the orange terpenes. The orange terpenes smell better. These things are the essence of oil. And I have people call me up all the time. Can you take that pine odor out, or can you take that orange odor out? It is an oil, and that's what's going to take it. And it's distilled. The only thing we add to it is we add a preservative and we add a emulsifier. That means otherwise oil would float on top of water, right? But with the emulsifier in there, it turns milky when you mix it with water. So whenever you're taking off these stains, if it is petroleum, if it is pollution, and you know that it's pollution from your little test of testing 2 different spots, you're going to have to use it straight. You don't mix it with water. And that's unfortunate because it's expensive. But as you can see, it takes a tent that is literally ruined and makes it white again. It's just all the difference in the world. You also use this organic oil on duct tape, tar, paint, anything. I had a guy that painted a tent, that rented a tent top. It was a big 40 by 60 top, and the renter spray painted a 2-foot square on there in blue for one tent and red for another, so he could tell people to go to the red tent for this and go to the blue tent for that. And the guy got it back, and he's just terrified. He goes, how do I get this off? And I said, take the organic oil, put it onto the painted area, and let it sit. Then come back in a few minutes with a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, which we'll talk about later too, and scrub it off. And it took off the paint. So if you ever have paint, you're going to scrub it with with organic oil. And if you have duct tape, tar, adhesive, anything of that nature, then you would use the organic oil in that as well. The acid, on the other hand, is very dilutable, and you dilute it like 1 to 30, up to 1 to 40. So if it's mineral deposits, that's what you would do. Now, there is an item out there that does mildew-proof a tent, but it's expensive. It's patented, and so therefore the price is a little high. It's around $60 US, and if you do the calculations of that, it ends up costing you about 2 cents per square foot to use it to mildew-proof a tent. The only time I would actually mildew-proof a tent is when we have an extended stay tent that's going to stay out all summer, and we know we have a lot of humidity in this area. And you'll notice that this mold and mildew only grew underneath this one section of tent. And we all are familiar with snow and what snow involves. And so what do we do with when you have snow? You always know the last place for snow to melt is on the north side of a house. And it'll melt on the east, west, and south, and that north side will still have a little bit of snow. Well, the sun hits this tent the same way. It's hitting the east, west, and south, but it's not hitting the north as intense. And that humidity grew mold and mildew on this tent. So if I know I'm going to put up an extended stay tent, I would mildew proof this section of this tent so that the renter doesn't call me back in the middle of the summer and have me go out there with my calcium hypochlorite, which, by the way, is still a bleach. It will still bleach out fabric. And depending, they couldn't have anything underneath here, and I would probably bleach out whatever clothes I'm wearing, not to mention whatever fabrics they had down here. So we have to make sure that that's just not as convenient as making them sure I mildew proof it. Anybody have any question about the mildew proof?
Yeah, we have a question actually about the oil. And the question is, does the oil work for tree sap?
It does. So what you have to do for tree sap is you take a butter knife and scrape off the thickness of the tree sap, and now you're just left with the residue, and the organic oil will take off the residue of that tree sap. But you got to get through that thickness. Sometimes tree sap is really thick, and you just take a non-serrated blade knife, like a butter knife, and scrape on it to get all that gook off on the top, and then use the organic oil afterwards. Now, let me make one other quick little notation about organic oil. It is an oil that cuts through greases and tars and asphalt and everything of that nature, but it will also take out the oils and greases in your hands and fingers. So if you stick your finger in a rag and start using that organic oil just with your finger in a rag to take something off, if you keep it in there for 15, 20 minutes, it will defat the end of your fingertip and it will split open. And because it just dried it out so hard, especially in the winter. Last summer, I got tar on the bottom of my car and from the road work. And I went out there and took the organic oil and was taking off the tar, and I got it all off and then forgot that I really shouldn't have stuck my finger in there without some type of glove on to prevent it attacking my fingers. And it split it open the next day where I had this little paper cut looking split. So just be aware that, you know, you don't, inhaling it's fine, all that is fine, but you don't want to come in, you know, half an hour of contact with that on a finger or hand without it drying your hands out really badly. Any other questions on the organic oil? That's a really good question. Okay, we're going to move on to drying a tent. So our first bottleneck in tent cleaning is always where you have the machine. You're either going to do it by hand, or you have a floor polisher, or you move it up to a drum washer. And that gets rid of that bottleneck and you get your tents out quicker. The next bottleneck is drying. And before we go into drying too much, this is different methods. People have put up a girder here that they could dry a tent. They got some string cable out here that they dry tents on. People hang them up in a building and dry them. This is actually a really expensive system. This is a conveyor belt that you connect your tents to, and it goes all around the building. You can see there, so it can hang for several days. Most people would dry tents this way. You string them up in a room, and you crank them up with a boat hoist or any type of cable crank, even a mechanical one that's got a drive system on it. And you can hang them up and let them dry in a room, and that helps. If you can create a drying room that has a closed off area, here's where you can really get your tents dry quickly. You close off the area and you put dehumidifiers in there. Everybody puts fans in there. Fans are fun, but typically a dehumidifier will suck the moisture off of that tent. It'll pull it out of the straps. It'll pull it out of the heater strap. It'll pull it out of the hems and the seams. If you all have, you know what fire and water restoration guys do, they bring in dehumidifiers just for that purpose, to get the moisture out of the floor, out of the walls, whatever it may be. So I highly recommend, if you had an area that was like 40 by 60 or whatever, and that was where you were drying your tents, I would put 2 or 3 dehumidifiers in there. And then you also put in fans. You need fans to work with the dehumidifiers, but it will suck the moisture out. Dehumidifiers run anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000, depending on how powerful one you get. But a normal small one's around $1,000, maybe up to $1,500 US. And it will take the moisture right out of a tent. Makes a big difference. So any questions on drying a tent?
For
Does anybody ever-
for a dehumidifier, we have about a 10,000 square foot warehouse that's like where we hang our tents. Would it be advantageous to use like a smaller dehumidifier just in our drying section? Or would we need something that would be able to accommodate our entire warehouse?
Yeah, if you're only using one section of that 10,000 square feet for drying, if you just put those dehus around that corner, it will help. I have seen people actually take old tent vinyl and hang it down just to kind of close it off a little bit, the drying area, and let the fans blow there, and they let the dehus run there. So absolutely, if you just put them where the drying area is, it's going to help. It's going to make a big difference because
Sure.
humidity builds up in a room, and especially if that's at the end of the 10,000 square feet and not in the middle. If it's at one end of that 10,000 square feet, I would put 2 or 3 dehus in there all day long with fans.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, yeah, it is in a corner of our warehouse. So, okay,
Oh,
that's
that's
great.
perfect. Yeah, that works out perfect.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions of dehumidifiers or fans or drying in general? This is the bottleneck usually, because everyone knows if you don't get that Keter dry or that strap, even one wet strap in a bag will leave mildew mark on the tent. So it just makes all the difference in the world to be able to dry them quickly instead of waiting 2 or 3 days hanging up. Okay. This is a repair room, and we're going to talk about repair a little bit. And let me talk about one little system here for finding pinholes. Everybody knows you can see a pinhole when it's up, and you can't see it when it's down. So this guy used the same girder to throw a tent over the girder, and then he fashioned a fan that was on wheels. If you'll notice, there's some little casters down here, and he attached a fluorescent light to it, and he runs that light down across that tent to find pinholes. And then he got a little bit more innovative, and he created this thing on casters with several fluorescent lights to run it down through that tent as it goes down. Just a neat little idea I thought was kind of fun. So I wanted to show you this and how it works. It just shows you pinholes. And what's really nice about pinholes is they make these little stickers that you can peel and stick and put them over a pinhole. They come in the size of a dime. This is larger, almost a $50 size. And it makes it so nice to just put it over a pinhole. You're always putting this on the shiny side, on the outside. You're not going to do it on the matte side, on the underneath. You're putting shiny to shiny. So let's talk about that. Has anybody ever seen this product before? You say yes if you have. H866 is a vinyl cement adhesive. And I am going to try to go back. I'm going to stop sharing. And
We see you now.
am I
Chuck.
back?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right, good.
And you also
So-
have one question in the chat about your patches. Who is selling those pre-cut patches?
There's several people that are, they're in the US. There's a company called Tent Wares. And Tent Wares is just WARES, with the tent. And then Top Tech Tent sells them. Top Tech Tent's a tent manufacturer on the East Coast. And I'm not sure about anyone else, but I know that those two. And Top Tech also sells a liquid paste white vinyl that you can put onto the tent that you can dry. So we're going to talk a little bit about repair. And so before we go on here, I'm going to try to put this camera down. And you can see we got a typical hole here. This is the shiny side, not the matte finish side. So as we put this on there, we could take a piece of vinyl fabric and it's square. We don't want square because these points are going to hit. So what you would need to do is you would come in here and just round off your points, right? So I'm going to quickly show that. I've already got one I've already rounded off, and I'm taking shiny to shiny. I got it over that hole, And now I'm going to take a pen, and yeah, I use a pen because it just works easy, and you can't see it through the vinyl anyhow because of our blockout. And I'm on the outside. And so now I've got this area here. I'm going to take this H866, which is a very odorous product. I mean, the fumes are pretty bad. And I'm gonna put this on in the area that I just outlined, right? And then I'm also going to put it on the dull side of my fabric. I'm doing this really quickly. I would actually take a little bit more time and be a little bit more precise with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait till this gets a little tacky. And I'm not doing that right now because that will take too much time. But then I take my piece and I'm going to put it right over here. And when I do, I'm typically using a roller. And I could even go so far as to take a heat gun, but this is already sticking. And I'm going to take this silicone roller and I'm going to really rub it good over here. And sometimes what that does, it pushes out adhesive. And I want that. I want all the adhesive to be down and off here. And now here's a cool little trick. I'm taking baby powder. My wife and I had 6 children, so I used a lot of baby powder in my life. And I am going to sprinkle it over this area. And any adhesive that's on the outside here, I can roll it up with my finger. And by doing that, if you don't do that, any adhesive that comes out, you will end up with a yellow stain all around here because that adhesive turns yellow later. So does that kind of make sense to people? And that's all I'm doing is making sure I got it. And this is on there pretty doggone good already. H866 is just, and what it does is basically welding or melting the 2 layers of vinyl together because it's a petroleum, but it's a strong petroleum and it's got an adhesive in there. So does that make sense on how to repair a hole or a split on white vinyl? All right, I am going to dump that into a garbage can. And any questions so far on that repair? Now we're going to be dealing with clear vinyl and repairing clear
Chuck,
vinyl. Yes.
you do have one question. How long did that repair last on the tent, or how long should that solution last on the tent?
It usually lasts years. It's if it's done right, and I actually sometimes will use a professional heat gun that actually has heat. So as I'm putting it down, I'm really heating it up and really making sure to roll it in there. But to be honest with you, I didn't even need it on that one. I guarantee you, it's not coming off. Even in the machine where it's being tumbled around all the time, taking abuse. The main thing is making sure that you get the points off. You don't want points of repair, to be hitting against something. That's how it comes off. So if you make sure you just round off your points, it doesn't come off. And that's why most of these patches that I showed you earlier, they all had rounded off corners, those pre-done patches that you peel and stick. And the pre-done patches are fine. That adhesive, it'll last you a year or so. But the H866, this stuff, it's going to last for years. It just doesn't come off because it's melted those 2 pieces of vinyl together. So I hope that makes sense. Any other questions on white vinyl? Okay. So going to clear vinyl. Clear vinyl is a mess. It's sensitive. It gets little horseshoes on it. When you turn it and hit it on places, it'll make a white horseshoe there. So you've got to be really careful with it and treat it nice. But what we're going to talk about is fixing a tear or a repair. So imagine we have a little area here. We're going to cut us a hole. So now we got us a nice sized little hole here cut into the vinyl. All right. The only thing we've ever found that really worked is a product called Gorilla Tape. And Gorilla Tape has its limitations. You're still going to be able to see it, but at least if we have a cut or a tear in the clear vinyl, it will take it off. So I'm going to take this out, and I've already had it out before, and I always make sure I save myself a little fold over right here. Now here's the problem with the Gorilla Tape, and I'm going to, hopefully you can see this, but as I pull it off, every time I stop it and pull again, what did I do? I left a white line, right? So unless I want to leave a white line on there, I need to pull it off in one good, clean strip. And when I do that, I don't have a white line. So then I'm going to hold this up, and I'm going to cut right there. And then I'm going to come over here to the cut, and I'm going to try not to hit it with my fingertips, because it'll leave fingerprints on the adhesive. And then I do this. I put it down. And now at that point, I'm going to come back on what I haven't touched, and I'm going to cut it. I still use my silicone roller, and you're going to be able to see that tape is there, but it allowed me to at least fix that cut where the cut was. And now I've got it fixed. And so it's not perfect, but it's literally the best we've ever come up with on trying to get a clear vinyl cut repaired. And it's called Gorilla Tape. Anybody have any questions on that product at all or anything? Does that make sense? Would you recommend using the tape versus heat welding? Yep. Yeah, I don't know about heat welding on clear. It fogs it. It doesn't make it clear anymore. At least we're still clear with this tape. Does that make sense? Any other questions on the tape and the clear? So clear is a different type of animal altogether. So when I clean clear, there's a different chemical for using it. You can never use a buffer or a floor machine. However, I have found that car wash brushes work really well. So if you ever go to any auto parts store, you'll see these car wash brushes. They got flagged ends. See how soft the ends are? And you can put a handle on it, and you can clean with this. The cleaner that we manufacture for clear vinyl is really sudsy. It almost mimics pot and pan soap, except we don't put any emollients in it for your hands because it leaves a film on the clear. We don't put anything else in it but just the detergent and the water sheeter, which means if you've ever gone to a car wash and you know how it sheets the water off, that's what that chemical is going to do. So it's real sudsy. And I use it just with this car wash brush, and I just scrub it onto the vinyl. It's nothing special, but I use it that way. And then also, I would use this brush if I wanted to fix up a pump-up sprayer. I'm using pump-up sprayers, and I'm usually designating these pump-up sprayers for each one of these uses. So if I got a 2-gallon pump-up sprayer, that's going to be my tank cleaner. Another one's going to be my mildew remover, my calcium hypochlorite. And then my other one is going to be for white vinegar and water. And I like that because this, for white vinegar and water, if I'm just using white vinegar and water, I'm trying to get off hard water stains that were on this vinyl. All right, now you remember the acid that we were talking about, the hydrofluoric, phosphoric, that you use on mineral deposits on white vinyl. I also would use that on this. It's safe for this. It's not going to hurt anything. The only thing the acid will do is it may turn the grommets, the metal grommets, discolor it, but nobody sees the grommet, so we don't care. What we're trying to do is get the hard water stains off of this. As you well know, some sidewall is all solid clear vinyl, and I had a sprinkler guy just going back and forth on one of the clear sidewalls, and it just left all kinds of bad mineral deposits, and he had to get it off with that acid. But usually hard water stains, where it's just rained or it's splattered onto the concrete has phosphates and mineral deposits, and then that splatter of the water onto the sidewall left mineral deposits. And so that's where I use the mineral deposits. I'm going to use the acid for any of that, but usually vinegar is sufficient to get off any type of hard water spots. All right, does anybody have any questions on that? And I'm going to go back to our sharing here again. And so does anybody know what we call this type of fabric? Anybody want to volunteer?
Translucent.
Translucent is actually proper. A lot of people call this sailcloth. And I don't like the term sailcloth because there is a real sailcloth that is polyester. But all they've done on this sailcloth is they took those 5 layers of vinyl I showed you earlier in the very beginning, where they pulled out the 2 blockout layers. So now we got a layer of vinyl, a layer of scrim, and a layer of vinyl. Instead of being a 16-ounce product like a 5-layer product is, regular white vinyl, now we have about a 10-ounce product. So if it was fragile when it was 16 ounces, it's a lot more fragile now that it's 10 ounces. And it's really one of those things that I'm not a big fan of, but it does look nice. A lot of times the mother of the bride wants one of those translucent, what we call sailcloth tents, and they want it. And if any of you, does anybody have a sailcloth tent? So can someone speak up and let me know?
Yes, we have quite a few.
All right, good. They're just very sensitive. And what else happens with a sailcloth tent? You can't repair it the way I just showed you to repair white vinyl, because you can see through it. So any patches, any pinholes you have, if you put a little dime patch over it or quarter patch, it is going to show through. So what some guys have done, they have taken pieces of vinyl, just like I showed you a little while ago, and cut it in the shape of a leaf. And then they have patched a tear or a cut. And then when someone looks up, they just think a leaf is on the tent. I don't know that that's the most strategic thing to do, but they say it works. So keep that in mind if you actually have a bad cut in your sailcloth tent. I have also taken the white paste vinyl and just dabbed it on pinholes that I had, and it works, and it doesn't really show up. You really don't see it too much as long as you keep that little dab of clear vinyl very small on just the pinhole. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? It's still vinyl, and it's just a really fragile vinyl, and you can't hide any of your sins on this tent. If there's a patch or anything up there, it's going to be seen. So you just got to treat it super, super fragile. You're not going to get the return on investment out of a sailcloth tent that you do out of a white vinyl tent for obvious reasons. So you need to charge more for these translucent tents, because they just are not going to last you as long and have the many, many years you're going to get out of a white vinyl 16-ounce fabric product. Any questions on sailcloth? Okay.
Hi, Chuck.
So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick question. You talk about the repairs of this sailcloth thing, but what about the cleaning?
Yeah, the cleaning is the exact same way that I showed you earlier. I have used a floor machine on it. And I be honest with you, I did just get afraid and I used a white pad instead of a red pad. Not that I really should have been, because I'm scrubbing the same area. I have a lot of customers that still will scrub it with a red pad because it's dirty and they need to get it clean. So clean it the exact same way you saw me earlier, clean it with the floor machine. And when you're dealing with peak tents versus flat panel tents, you're always going to have to worry about that peak and fold the peak over when you scrub. And then a lot of times I'll use a black bristle push broom, maybe a 24-inch push broom, black bristle, It's polypropylene is what that bristle's made out of. And I'll use it to scrub around the peak because it's harder to get the floor machine around the top of that peak. And so if that helps a little bit, especially on sailcloth, you've just got to be careful about what you're doing and running the machine on it or scrubbing it at all.
Okay,
Does that
thank you.
help? I hope.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so what we want to end up with, before we go to what we're ending up with, has any of you ever, please speak up if you have, had to clean a tent that was already erected? You had to clean a tent that was
Yeah, we
up.
have.
Okay, here's a kind of counterintuitive thing that you need to know. Intuition would tell you, hey, let's start at the top and work our way down. You don't. You actually start at the bottom. And the reason why is if you start at the top, as the cleaner drips down the side of the tent, it leaves clean streaks. And then when you actually clean the rest of it, it's the streaks don't actually go away. You can still see them there. So I highly recommend you always start at the bottom, which is counterintuitive, cleaning here and work your way up to the peak. And so that will make a big difference, and it won't streak and leave clean streaks. Does anyone have any questions on that? How did you do it when you cleaned the tent that was already erected? Did you use a lift bucket?
We just have like telescopic handles that we put onto our brushes, and then we would spray it. Unfortunately we've had to do the outside and the inside. So the inside we've used scissor lifts, which cleaning on the inside is obviously far worse than the outside. The inside was due to mold, obviously.
Yes.
But yeah, that just sucked because it just all dripped on us as we're cleaning it. So not ideal.
It's not ideal at all. And if it is just mold that you're taking care of, that calcium hypochlorite that you can just spray up there and let dwell, you just have to spray it so that it's not going to drip back on top of you. Or always wear painter's clothes that you don't mind getting bleached out when you're doing that calcium hypochlorite. The cal hypo is still a chlorine, and it will still take the color out of anything that's a fabric. And then if the customer, the renter, has carpet down or tablecloth, anything underneath it other than grass and dirt, you will need to protect it if you do spray it. But it makes it a whole lot easier than scrubbing it with a brush to clean, to use that calcium hypochlorite with a sprayer. And you go up on your scissor lift and just keep spraying and keep moving out of the way of your next layer that you're spraying, if that makes sense. Okay. So what we want to end up with is, of course, pretty, clean, organized, grade A tents that are ready for the next level of the next wedding, trying to maintain that A-level tent, basically is what we're trying to do in general. So I'm going to come back over here. Hopefully I can be seen again, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
good. So I hope that makes sense a little bit better on how to maintain your tents and how to clean your tents. Does anybody have any questions? But before I go to too many questions, is Ryan still here? Ryan McDonald? Or is he already gone? Ryan, I guess he's already had to leave. So Ryan calls me up last week, and he actually has clear vinyl, and it has these big maple leaf brown stains, light brown stains on this clear vinyl. I've had leaf stains on white vinyl, and I knew how to handle that, but I did not know exactly how it would work with clear vinyl. And so I told him the only way to get out a leaf stain, when a leaf decays, it releases tannic acid, and that acid gets into the vinyl. And the only way to get it out is with a infrared light or an ultraviolet light. But most of you guys also have what we call a carving lamp. And a carving lamp is that red infrared light, and it usually has an arm, and you have the roast beef underneath it sitting there and you're carving on the lamp. And the infrared light moves the molecules in the meat. It keeps it warm. And that's why we use it. And does everyone that I can see right here, do you have that infrared light, the carving lamp, the heated lamp? If you take that lamp and just put it over the area where that leaf stain is, usually within 30 minutes to an hour, it bleaches it out. Ryan McDonald he's with Element Event Solutions. So maybe you guys know him. I don't know. And he did it. And in 20 minutes, it took out the leaf stains. And he was just flabbergasted. But it's one of those little hints that just works amazing. The infrared light and the ultraviolet light. The ultraviolet light is what we call black light. Remember the black light lamps? That will bleach it out as well. But most people already have the infrared light bulb and the carving lamp as a fixture to hold the bulb that you can put in there. And it takes out leaf stains, crepe paper, confetti stains. A lot of times you get wet crepe paper on a tent. If you lived in Arizona, and believe me, I've got some customers in Arizona that have told me this, they will put up a tent that has crepe paper or confetti stains on it, and within a day or two, it bleaches it out. Well, we don't have that kind of light most places in the country, and certainly not in Canada in the winter. So what you're going to do is you just take that light and let it shine on there, and usually within 30 minutes to an hour, it'll take it out. Although Ryan had it taken out in about 20 minutes. And he had several of these big maple leaf stains. So it was really a mess. Any questions about any other stains that you may have encountered that you got a question about?
If you've got a lot of confetti stains on the inside, put the tent upside down. Just on a frame, flip it on a pole. A pole tent will go upside down. Put it up for about a week, and the sunlight burns all that stuff off.
It does, absolutely.
Just
If
cooks
you
it
don't
right
have
off.
sunlight, that's where the problem becomes. But you're absolutely right. Thank you, Scott. Anybody else have any questions? So we covered mildew, no elbow grease. It's just the calcium hypochlorite. Let it dwell. Don't try to scrub it. That is the biggest problem I have. People call me up. It won't take out the mildew. If it's mildew, that chlorine will eventually make it disappear. It's just a matter of time, and let it dwell on there. I've gone so far as to take a rag on a particular bag area, soak it in the calcium hypochlorite, and put it over the stain so it'll stay wetter longer. But usually just using a pump-up sprayer and spraying it down, that'll do it. Any other
Chuck,
thoughts?
you do have one question in the chat about stains from cooking smoke, like from barbecues and things like that.
That is a great question. You have a rainy day. You rent out a tent to someone and it rains, and they bring the grill that they're cooking hot dogs and hamburgers on and bring it underneath the tent. All of that smoke, all of that protein grease, all goes up on the inside of the tent. So what you have to do is you have to use the organic oil to get it off. That organic oil will take it right off. You have to use it straight. So there again, you're flipping the inside out down so you can scrub on it, and you spray that organic oil on it. If can run a buffer on it, run a floor machine on it, that helps. However, with the floor machine on the organic oil, I learned the hard way. There again, I told you, I've got 40 years of mistakes. You have to use a white pad, because about several years ago, I was using a red pad, scrubbing a tent that had a whole lot of smoke on it. And after about 20 or 30 minutes, that red pad started dissolving and leaving a pink film onto the tent. So I use a white pad now when I'm scrubbing the inside of a tent for smoke, protein grease, anything like that. Sometimes you'll have guys that use incense, and you rent a tent and they put incense in there and it gets in the vinyl, and you have to take that out as well. But if it's really bad on the smell and it did not come out after you cleaned it with the organic oil, the orange oil or the pine oil, you can run an ozone machine. Everybody know what an ozone machine is? An ozone machine converts O2, which is oxygen, into O3, and you can put it underneath the tent. I drop the sidewalls and I have the tent erected and just leave it trapped on the ground and put my ozone machine underneath it. You can run it for a few hours. Do not run it for a day or two. Only run it for a few hours. It will work. The reason why, if you run it for several days, it starts robbing the plasticizer, which is the flexibility of the vinyl, out of the tent, and it'll make it stiff. So make sure you only run that ozone machine for a few hours. Another mistake we learned.
And Chuck, we'll take one last question, I think, and it's in the chat. And Sean says, I have a client that set up tents for months at a time and ran propane fireplaces under them. Is there any way to remove the black soot?
Yeah, you can try the organic oil. That is the way to try. And so you're going to go in there, and you're definitely going to use a floor machine and spray that organic oil on top of it. Let it sit for just a minute or two and start scrubbing with a white pad, and it should take it off. But that's a lot of propane for a lot of smoke for a long time. And it's maybe a little bit tougher. It may have permanently stained it. Let me give you one more little hint. I know we're running out of time, but back during when the Olympics were in Salt Lake, the Olympic Committee put yellow stickers all over the tops of all these tents that were up on the side of these Rocky Mountains. And that sun is really intense. And that adhesive actually had some petroleum in it. And when they pulled off all those Olympic Committee stickers, they all had big old huge yellow stains on the tops of all these expensive tents. And they were just trashed. The yellow stains were just horrible because they had several stickers on there. It will turn it yellow. So the propane and the protein and the smoke grease and oil, the kind of a resin there, sometimes if it sits too long, it will permanently yellow the vinyl. And there's nothing you can do about that. I hope that makes sense.
Well,
Always be aware when stickers go in your tent. If it's going to be for longer than a few days, I don't let them put stickers on my tents because you never know what's in that adhesive. They can permanently yellow the top.
okay. Well, Chuck, wow, what a great presentation. I just want to give you a huge thank you for sharing this valuable information with us today. Everything you said was incredibly informative, and I definitely myself learned a lot. So, as I mentioned before, Chuck has graciously offered to answer any additional questions through email. So feel free to send him an email after if you're looking to get more clarification on anything. So that's all for us today. I want to thank you all for joining us. And once again, thanks to Chuck Shipp for sharing his knowledge with us today. And I just want to say have a great week, everyone. And thank you for joining.